acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to their elders, leaders, past, present and emerging. So I'm Steve Murphy, I'm the National Secretary of the AMW. I've been in this role for 6 weeks now, made a bit of a splash in the first couple, but it's a role that I'm really proud to do on behalf of AMW members. And it's almost, I say this all the time, but you know, every single position I've held in the AMW, no matter whether it was a shop floor delegate all the way through to the National Secretary, I don't really see myself other than a worker, a feeder that's just been elected to represent union members. So I do this position in that same kind of context and same thought process, and I don't intend to lose that grounding or that kind of notion. I might first kind of congratulate all of the new and returning leaders to AFTINET that were elected tonight. There's looking forward to seeing you uphold the proud history that AFTINET has as, you know, a representative voice of reason in this Australian trade debate that keeps going on and on. Now, if you would have asked me or told me back in start of 2020, back in January, that we would be, for lack of a better word, enjoying the support of big cohorts of our community and government that say that Australian manufacturing jobs are really important and they should be onshored, I would not have believed it. But we find ourselves with a whole host of people now echoing this sentiment that we should walk away from the harmful free trade ideology and start to think about our independence and being able to secure our own domestic manufacturing requirements. Now, many of us have been fighting the issues around free trade, not just for years, but for many decades. And it feels sometimes like you're screaming into an abyss, that no one is listening, and no matter how bad the effects, that the interests of private capital will always rule and always win. And Pat would agree with me, the level of frustration that you go through when you're talking to decision makers and putting the bare facts on the table about how workers and their communities are being negatively affected by this policy, but they just seem to wholesale away our sovereignty and our independence and get away with it, because we've got generations of working class people that are distracted, just keeping their heads above water in late stage capitalist society, and they're too distracted to care. Now, it's satisfying, of course, to be proven right after all these years that, you know, COVID hits us, and it turns out that what we were saying was correct, that offshoring large chunks of our own manufacturing capability and our independence was not the right decision. Now, we've got a big responsibility, and there's a sense of urgency to say that we've got a role as activists, as trade activists, to say that now is a time for us to be able to stand up and talk a little bit louder. And this moment calls for us to be far more ambitious in what we are asking for. So not just us at the table when I say that, not just us in this room, but those people in government, those people within the ALP, those people within the trade union movement, who we have slowly watched them capitulate to the idea that offshoring our jobs would in some way, at some point, lead to a better standard of living and a better society for all of us. And of course for private enterprise as well. There's far too much at stake as they've been dismantling in a really harmful way with these policies the standard of living that we enjoyed as Australians. And when I talk about standard of living, I don't mean, you know, how many cars people have got in their driveway, but I mean the standard of living you have from having a good, secure job that pays well, that allows you to raise a family, buy a home, live somewhere that is safe, and actually aspire for your kids to do something better. And we've lost all of that so that we can buy a television set or a refrigerator for $70 cheaper. Now, COVID has touched every single person's life in all different ways. And there's three images that always resonate when people talk about what the effects of COVID have been. The first one has been the long Centrelink lines that went all the way around the block when we're seeing those on TV, or if you experienced them yourself. Secondly is our supermarket shelves being laid bare. Right in the middle of a health and economic crisis, we can't get the things we need from our supermarkets. And thirdly, we're seeing our healthcare workers right in the middle of the pandemic having to make their own PPE. Now, it's workers that carried that burden all the way through the pandemic. And it's only right that workers have that contribution recognised right now. Now, government is not going to step up. We've seen that, and they've shown that after COVID, they are just waiting for us to return back to what they say is the new normal. And for them, the new normal just means that big business is able to make more profits, and workers' wages and standard of living will continue to be pressed downward. And this is why we have watched them hand out big tax cuts to the big end of town and to those that are very, very wealthy. We've watched big handouts to gas companies, to what they say is going to be a gas-led recovery to our economy, and this hollow, inaccessible manufacturing announcement that will see none of our manufacturing businesses really be able to invest the way that they need to bounce back after the bit that they've taken. Now, I think that is because largely our politicians have not clocked on to the strife that we have found ourselves in. The Australian Institute report that the AMW Commission showed that Australia is 36 out of 36. We are last in the OECD when it comes to our manufacturing performance. And that goes a long way to explain the panic that we had to endure during COVID, when we weren't able to manufacture the things that we needed to be able to get us through. And it's turned our worlds upside down, and workers in their lunchroom right now are thinking, how are we going to pull ourselves through this? How are we going to get into a society that is more fair and equal? How are we going to have our government responding to this and securing our industries? And hopefully it's one of the ones that I'm working in. And of course, what are the jobs for our kids going to look like in the future if this is the way that our society functions when we're in a time of crisis? Now, all of this could have been avoided, of course, if we'd not had decades worth of policies offshoring large chunks of our industries and were able to secure all those supply chains onshore. We would not have endured the panic that we did. We would not have had to endure the long Centrelink lines. We would not had to endure the supermarket shelves, and our healthcare workers would have got all of the safety gear they need to be able to protect their own safety and the safety of those people and lives they were trying to save. But this goes against every fibre of my being when I say that this one is not just about labour versus capital. Because the truth is that free trade agreements, they don't just not enrich the lives of working people, but they don't enhance small to medium enterprises either. They will never have a hope of cashing in on these free trade agreements. They will always be driven down on costs, down on price, and the things that small to medium enterprises normally innovate and specialise in just get done by whoever can do it cheapest. So this is a struggle that is not, as traditionally I would normally say, as labour versus capital. Those small to medium enterprises are just as big a losers as what working people are in this. So we need to think about why we do these agreements. Of course, if you had to do a checkbox to say, let's list all of the things that are in the interest of working people in their communities that are contained in free trade agreements, you come up with a very, very short list. But then you do a list to say, what are the things that a government is just acting as a profit enhancer for big business and big political donators, you'd end up with a very long list, because that's who benefits out of these free trade agreements and the way that they have done. Now we expect an all-out assault on working people and our communities from the conservative side of politics. And some of us do hope that the ALP will rise to the ambition that we have about what trade agreements actually should look like. If you're going to redesign what trade would look like on a world scale, it would be about lifting people up. It would be identifying that everybody should get access to decent and fair healthcare that everybody could afford. It would be access to education no matter where you live. It would actually be lifting. So if a boilermaker was making $40 an hour to do particular work, you do that anywhere in the world and get paid the same. That is what trade should look like if we're going to trade with each other. It's about lifting people up out of poverty and to all be able to enjoy the wealth that we create. But we know that that is not what it is used for. There are three areas of the ALP's draft platform that unfortunately we're going to have to agitate again, even though we got a significant win in 2018. The first one is about how the Labor Party needs to behave when they are in opposition. And we saw during the TPP and the RCEP that they don't necessarily uphold the platform when it comes to making decisions, when they're faced with a contest between standing up for what the party's supposed to believe in and being worried about what might appear on page 9 of the Murdoch Press the following day. The second one, of course, is that we've seen during the TPP and the RCEP the way that these trade agreements are flawed. There is no transparency, there is no consultation, and you do an agreement in secret, you always end up with a one-sided deal. The truth is that our negotiators at DFAT are always out-negotiated, and we always end up with a lesser deal than what we would have had we been transparent and open and consulted with those people who would be affected. And I said many, many times, you look at who's in the room when they're negotiating these agreements, there's plenty of interest from big business and big corporation, plenty of people in there that are political lobbyists, plenty of people in there representing politicians. But there's nobody in there representing the interest of people who are unemployed or are on the pension or are working or are trying to start a business or are union members. We don't get a voice at the table, and we certainly don't get a seat. So it is pretty disappointing to see our work slowly being unravelled when we actually want to see a lift in the ambition of the party. And in the absence of political leadership, of course, it's now down to us to show what that leadership needs to look like by doing everything that we can. So there's two things that I want to share with you that the AMW is going to do over the course of the latter part of 2020, but of course what we're going to do in 2021 as a bit of a campaign to fight back. Because it's going to be unionised workers that will deliver the change and an alternate kind of vision for the kind of country that we want to be. So the first one, of course, is that we launched the Hunter Jobs Alliance up in the Hunter last week. And it is unions, not just the AMWU, but a broad suite of unions that actually care about local workers. And we're linking up with environmental groups to campaign and deliver diversification for the Hunter Valley. And I want to say openly, because it can be misconstrued by people who want to use it for political gain, 70% of our members from the AMW and the Hunter rely on the coal industry or coal-related industry for their incomes. And we have the deepest respect and regard for workers in that industry. Their work and their achievement should be honoured. And they should be celebrated as well. They're one of the few industries that got the best long service leave and the best conditions and some of the best wages in the whole country. And the only reason that they got that is because they are union members and they fought for it. And what we transition to next, as decisions get made in overseas boardrooms, we've got a choice between having low pay, insecure, poverty work, or we can actually have a different model. And the different model means that they're union jobs. That they're union jobs because union jobs determine the difference between just having work and having a decent rate of pay, a secure job, and a decent standard of living. And that is why the Hunter Jobs Alliance has been founded and launched, and will do a whole lot of work to make sure that the Hunter is on a path to make sure that there is justice for working people as part of this transition. The second one, of course, is we're going to launch a massive campaign to reinvest in Australian manufacturing. Tomorrow in the afternoon, we've got 12 of our best and brightest rank and file members from all our different industries across the country coming together, and they are going to develop a campaign plan in that committee that will be genuinely member-led by our union. As I said at the start, I'm a rank and file member of our union, and I'm going to slowly give our union back to our members every single day that I'm on the job. They will build a post-COVID plan for rebuilding Australian manufacturing that will onshore our industries and jobs and have a plan for the future that not just them but their kids can rely on. And I'm not going to give too much or preempt what their decisions and their effort might do in relation to the detail, but once this is off the ground, it's like everything else. Once you tell working people about the problem and you tell them the source of that problem, they soon come up with a plan, and once working people develop a plan, then you get action. So it's disappointing that the ambition to pull ourselves from this crisis falls to activists and workers, but it's a challenge that every single one of them is up for. So it's going to take an unprecedented effort and solidarity to win something better for all of us. And I trust that the work that we all do over the next 12 months will be vital to that collective effort, and I look forward to supporting every single other union and every single worker and every single activist through that. And thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight, Pat, and congratulations again to the renewed leadership team of AFTINET.